Introduce our speaker, Kelsey Lang. Kelsey is the Toronto Legal Coordinator for the Refugee Sponsorship Support Program, a nationwide project that trains lawyers and law students to assist groups seeking to privately sponsor refugees to Canada. Kelsey is a lawyer and previously worked as an immigration and refugee lawyer at a law firm in Toronto. Kelsey is a member of the Law Society of Upper Canada, the Refugee Lawyers Association, and the Canadian Association of Refugee Lawyers. Thank you very much for joining us today, Kelsey. Please go ahead with your presentation.
So Kelsey, you're still muted? Just FYI.
There we go. Can you hear me now, Sarah?
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. And the screen is viewed properly?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So hello, everyone. Thanks, Sarah and Lorraine, for the introduction. As they mentioned, my name is Kelsey, and I am part of the Refugee Sponsorship Support Program, SSP for short, and for brevity, it'll be easier to say that. We would like to thank you on behalf of our organization for your interest in attending this webinar and learning about our program. We are a national network of legal professionals who are together responding to the refugee crisis. Today, I want to discuss who we are as an organization, how we formed, and the type of services we offer, so we're better able to provide you with information, and hopefully you're able to provide that information to your clients. As Sarah and Lorraine mentioned, if at any time you have any questions about our program or anything that comes up, I'm happy to answer them. So just please fill them in, and they will either stop me if they think the question is relevant, or they will save it and we'll answer those questions at the end of the session. But I welcome any questions. I also know that Sarah and Lorraine mentioned that I'm based out of Toronto, but we are a national program, and I'll go into details about that. So I do know we have members on the webinar that are here from across the province, so I want to make sure that I can address your questions as well, so you understand that we are an accessible program and hoping to serve as many organizations across the province as possible. So just a brief background about the current global refugee crisis. As most of you are aware, I'm sure, because of the work that you do, we are in the midst of a terrible refugee crisis. This is the worst since the Second World War. Conflicts continue to worsen, and people are suffering and dying trying to reach safety. The world, as a result, is seeing a staggering number of refugees today. And as I'm sure most of you know, a refugee is someone who has fled their country of origin and cannot return because of armed conflict, massive human rights violations, or a well-founded fear of persecution. That is a crucial aspect to refugees that sometimes the public is unaware of. A refugee does need to have left their country of origin or habitual residence to qualify to be sponsored to Canada or qualify as a refugee in the international definition. According to the UNHCR, there are 65.6 million people that have been forcibly displaced from their homes. 22.5 of these are refugees or asylum seekers, and over 50% of those are children. And on average, 28,300 individuals worldwide are forced to flee their homes every single day. So clearly this is an ongoing crisis that needs to be addressed. In terms of other countries, around the world, many countries are closing their doors to refugees. However, in Canada, we have a particularly unique program called the Private Sponsorship of Refugees program. We are one of the first and remain one of the only countries in the world to empower individual citizens to directly sponsor refugees abroad to safety, in particular being able to choose the refugee that you would like to sponsor if you do know them. This particular private sponsorship program is different from the government-assisted refugee program, under which the Government of Canada pays to bring refugees here. The private sponsorship program instead allows Canadians themselves, either citizens or permanent residents, an opportunity to be directly involved in bringing refugees overseas to safety. And this is an incredibly powerful tool that's been given to permanent residents and Canadian citizens. Historically, the private sponsorship program has been undertaken by a small number of organizations and ad hoc groups who sponsor a small number of families each year. At the same time, this private sponsorship program is very onerous and complex. Many new and inexperienced sponsor groups require support and guidance in order to avoid rejections based on technical errors. In fact, in some streams, rejection rates have been more than 90%, but this is often due to technical errors within the application, unrelated to the merits of the actual refugee story and their application. As a result, by having an SSP pro bono lawyer, so one of our volunteer lawyers, assist with an application, they'll be able to help sponsors complete the application and as a result have a direct impact on helping more refugees to find safety faster. So just as a background, the SSP was created in direct response to the unprecedented humanitarian crisis and Canadians' desire to help in the face of this crisis. The publication of the tragic picture of Alan Kurdi in September 2015 dramatically increased Canadians' awareness of this refugee crisis, and it led to extraordinary interest in private sponsorship. Thousands of groups across the country mobilized in their churches, living rooms, community centers to raise money and to prepare application packages to sponsor many of these refugees who they saw were overseas. Given the complexities of the PSR program and the fact that organizations who traditionally do private sponsorship work were completely overwhelmed by requests for assistance, a distinct need for support for these applications came from the Canadian legal community, and we felt we were uniquely positioned to address this issue. So who we are. We are a group of Canadian lawyers who mobilize to assist groups applying to resettle refugees in Canada. And we quickly grew, as I mentioned, into a national organization with branches in 11 cities across the country, and we provide pro bono legal support, so free legal support for refugee sponsorship applications across the country. Over our almost 2 years in existence now, we have trained over 1,300 lawyers and law students across the country, including over 500 in the Greater Toronto area. And all of these lawyers and law students work on refugee sponsorship applications at no cost. The SSP supports private sponsorship in Canada through the delivery of lawyer training, direct sponsor group support, and public information. The primary objectives of our activities as an organization are to facilitate refugee protection by encouraging and supporting effective use of the private refugee sponsorship stream, and to build lasting capacity in this important sector, as we want the PSR program to continue to be used in the most effective and beneficial way possible. Ultimately, our program aims to promote access to justice for vulnerable refugees and their sponsors by facilitating access to the private sponsorship process, and as I mentioned before, helping more refugees find safety in Canada as efficiently as possible. So we operate in Canada from coast to coast, and at the heart of what we do is really the work of our volunteer lawyers and law students who provide direct one-to-one support to sponsor groups in their application process. Through providing, allowing our lawyers and law students to provide this support is because we operate under 4 different programs. So the first is that we provide training and expert mentorship for our lawyers and law students. And our training is done in partnership with the Refugee Sponsorship Training Program, which I believe has held at least one other webinar in this fashion. And if you aren't aware of them, they are a governmental organization who provides educational information on private refugee sponsorship. So they are one of our partners, and we do joint presentations, and they also, as I mentioned, host our training for our lawyers and law students. We also provide direct support to sponsor groups by our pro bono lawyers and law students, and these are coordinated by our local facilitation teams who are placed across the country. We also have a public outreach program and a campus program on many of our law schools. I'm going to go through these programs in more detail coming forward, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty about these services that we offer and how we can benefit your organizations. So first, for training and expert mentorship for our lawyers and law students. As I mentioned, we have core training for our lawyers and law students, which is done in partnership with the Refugee Sponsorship Training Program. We have worked together with RSTP to develop and deliver training on the PSR program, and it's designed specifically for our lawyers and law students who come from any background but want to offer their volunteer services to this organization. Our core training is also supplemented by our support materials and bulletins. We have a comprehensive lawyer manual and many other tools and resources that are readily accessible to all of our pro bono lawyers and law students on a protected portion of our website to ensure that they have all the updated information that they need. As I'm sure you all know, the government does tend to change forms and information quite quickly, so we want to make sure that all of our lawyers are abreast of that information as soon as it comes out. Finally, we also provide expert support to our lawyers. So many of our tailored information about refugee sponsorship comes from the experts we have involved in our program who are well-renowned immigration and refugee law experts across Canada. They provide support to our lawyers on complicated applications and assist with navigating the sponsorship process when that is needed. In every city, our program strives to facilitate one-to-one support from lawyers to sponsor groups. The service delivery models we have in different chapters across the country vary according to the local needs and circumstances. But so far over the past 2 years, two predominant service models have emerged. We have one-to-one matching, where sponsor groups are matched directly with SSP lawyers for ongoing support on their application. And we also have legal clinics, where sponsor groups will arrive at a preset time and place and receive in-person assistance from a lawyer and law students. We also are trying a new idea as well of combining our legal clinics with information sessions with RSTP, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that as we move forward. Our third component of our work is our public outreach program. So we provide plain language information on private sponsorship on our website, and we also participate in public information sessions to inform potential sponsor groups about the private sponsorship process. We often do this in collaboration with local or national partner organizations, including RSTP and various SAWs, so sponsorship agreement holders. Many of our online resources are also translated into French and Arabic in order to make them more accessible to a broader demographic. This includes newcomers themselves. We hope that it is accessible to them as well. Our SSP staff are also able to respond to public inquiries about private sponsorship received through the organization's national email account, as well as local accounts. Law students have also been a very important part of our program from the very beginning. They have been heavily involved in our training sessions, both as organizers and participants, and several law schools have established SSP-linked courses and clinical programs to provide intensive training and opportunities for direct support to sponsor groups. Students engage in local SSP activities in various ways, including assisting in day-to-day program coordination, organizing and participating in clinics, creating and delivering public outreach and information, and undertaking important legal work, all while working with a lawyer to provide direct support to sponsor groups. This allows law students working through the SSP to have an opportunity to work directly with a lawyer on an actual legal application, which will hopefully assist with developing skills for their future. So most importantly, probably to most of you, is who do we help? What services do we offer, and how can we provide assistance to your clients? So we help two categories of people: sponsor groups and Canadian family members of refugees abroad. The nature of support we provide depends on the type of group that they are. Sponsor groups include groups of 5, community sponsors, and sponsorship agreement holders and constituent groups. Now, I'm only going to briefly discuss these groups, but if people do have questions that are in more detail, I'm happy to answer those at the end of the session. To learn more about the differences between these groups and their requirements, our lawyers help sponsor groups in a number of ways. We help them understand the eligibility requirements to be able to sponsor a refugee. We help them, the sponsor group, understand the eligibility requirements of the refugees themselves to ensure they are eligible to submit an application. Our lawyers answer questions about the PSR system, and they guide sponsor groups through the application process. This can include helping to correctly fill out the forms, ensuring all their supporting documentation is collected and translated, doing country research to support the refugee application and craft a persuasive narrative to ensure they meet the refugee definition, and also communicating with the refugees abroad to ensure that all the necessary information has been obtained. Now, many refugees around the world also have family members in Canada who are desperately seeking to bring them here to safety. Often we have these Canadian family members who are newcomers themselves, and they have left behind loved ones and they're desperate to be reunited with them. Unfortunately, it's often the case that these family members do not have the capacity in terms of forming their own groups or raising enough money to sponsor their loved ones on their own. These difficulties are often compounded by the problem of understanding and navigating this complex sponsorship system. While we are unable to help with fundraising or connecting families with sponsor groups, we do connect them with lawyers to receive summary advice about the private sponsorship system and the requirements to be eligible to sponsor. Our lawyers who connect with this type of client can help them in a number of ways, including explaining the requirements to form an eligible sponsor group, explaining the sponsorship process, and providing contact information for sponsorship agreement holders and other refugee serving agencies in their community that may be able to help build capacity or connect with sponsors. Because SSP clients are fully formed sponsor groups and Canadian family members of refugees abroad seeking help, we do not work directly with the refugees abroad to help them find sponsors in Canada, unfortunately. So there must be a Canadian group willing to sponsor them in order for us to be able to help and provide them with assistance in submitting their applications. So just briefly, in terms of these sponsor groups, for a group of 5 or community sponsor, the individuals must meet eligibility requirements, which means for a group of 5, you have over 5 members. All of the members must be over the age of 18. They all must be Canadian citizens or permanent residents. They all must be living in the same communities that the refugees will settle in, and they must not have criminal charges or convictions. They also must meet as a group the requirements of financial capacity as well as settlement capacity. So this is all going to be explained in detail on the forms that they are submitting in terms of what settlement services and support they are going to be able to offer the refugees for the 12 months that they are required to support them once they have arrived in Canada. It's also important to note that refugees that are sponsored under a group of 5 or community sponsor need a UNHCR or state refugee status recognition document to be eligible to apply under this program. If the refugee does not have a UNHCR or country status refugee document, their only option will be to submit their application through a sponsorship agreement holder. So speaking of partnering with a sponsorship agreement holder, every SAW has its own criteria for partnership, and the sponsors are responsible for contacting the SAW directly to inquire about the criteria and inform their clients of those criteria. When might a sponsor group want to partner with a SAW? It's a good idea if the group needs support in fundraising, because SAWs have charitable status, which means they can issue tax receipts when they receive donations. As I mentioned before, if the sponsor group is linked to a refugee who does not possess a UNHCR or state refugee status recognition document, then they must submit through a SAW. And it's also beneficial if the sponsorship group would like access to the full BVOR list of refugees. And just briefly, the BVOR list is Blended Visa Office Referred Program. Those are refugees who have been selected by the Canadian government to be sponsored here under this specific program, BVOR, which is that the government will support half of the year of financial support, and the private sponsor supports the other 6 months. So it's a joint sponsorship between the government and a private sponsor group. Okay, how do we help? A note on our intake. So when things were very busy at the beginning of our project, there was a great need for summary legal advice, and we created a position of a designated intake lawyer to provide one-off meetings. The lawyer would be responsible for providing information and assessing whether the group was eligible to continue working with an SSP lawyer on an ongoing basis. As things have slowed down over the past 2 years in terms of the large numbers, we've moved away from using this intake lawyer towards building it into the one-on-one matching model. So what we do now in terms of one-on-one matching is it's an individual ongoing relationship between the lawyer and the client. Sometimes this will be a meeting to provide advice or answer specific questions. Other times it is an ongoing relationship until the application is submitted. And SSP staff facilitate these matches over email and connect the lawyer to the client, and they facilitate how they would like to continue their relationship moving forward. In terms of our sponsorship clinics, we host legal clinics in Ontario, and clients are provided with a copy of the application ahead of time to attempt to fill out with whatever information they have. This will then be provided with the lawyer, and they will meet with the lawyer at a set time and day at the legal clinic, where the lawyer will spend a few hours with the client, go get all the information that they're able to gather during that time, and then after the clinic they will continue to work on the application together in whatever way works best for them, whether that means having another meeting at their office, whether it means communicating over email, whatever works best for that client and lawyer, they will continue to do so until they submit the application to the government. In the Greater Toronto area, in Toronto, we tend to have clinics, at least we try to have clinics once a month. Our next one is on August 12th, and then the following one is on September 9th. And we also have one in Ottawa this evening, actually. And I just wanted to make a note about these sponsorship clinics. As I mentioned earlier, I know that there are people that are listening in from across the province, and we are right now hoping to expand in particular across southwestern Ontario, but hopefully across all of the province to be able to provide our legal support to anyone who would like to receive support on a refugee sponsorship application, and in fact anyone that is across the country. So what we will typically are located in an area where we do not have a regular legal clinic. We will, for example, you are in Kitchener, and you contact me in Toronto, I will tell you we have our next legal clinic on August 12th. is that something to the city or meet with a lawyer? And if the person says, yes, I'm willing to drive, you know, the hour and a half, 2 hours, and I'll come in, then great. If not, I'll also offer the option of connecting with the lawyer at that same time, same day, but over the phone. So the lawyer will come to our legal clinic and have the support that they may need or want at our clinic, and it will just be a scheduled meeting time where you will meet with them on the phone. If that doesn't work, again, then we'll probably move to the one-on-one matching, where we'll connect you and you can work with the lawyer to see what suits you best in terms of receiving the support. So we are flexible and open to many different options. We just want to make sure everyone is receiving this free legal support. So as much as we can accommodate what your needs are, we will try to do so. Now, in terms of the kind of more visual structure of our program, starts with the self-assessment. So this means when we're first contacted, we will direct the sponsor group to online resources to ensure they understand fully about the sponsorship and that they are eligible, in fact, to sponsor the refugee, and that the refugee is eligible to apply. We will then do an intake where we assist the families and sponsor groups in understanding the PSR system and the sponsorship avenues to ensure they are ready to prepare an application. Once they are ready, we will do a lawyer file review, where the lawyer will review the information forms or just information that the sponsor group has provided, and so they can be prepared. The lawyer will then meet with the sponsor or contact at the legal clinic, where they will work on the case for a few hours. Then the lawyer will continue, as I mentioned, with follow-up and submission. So they will continue to work on the case with the sponsor or contact until the case is ready to be submitted to the government. This is, while I have it in this visual, it is a fluid process and will be potentially changing going forward, where we might also have an information session at the same time as a legal clinic, so that we can be offering public information to anyone else who would like to join our program, and then they can attend at the next legal clinic. So it's just a way to ensure presentations and all of the events that we're having and that we're getting the word out as best as possible. Also, just wanted to put this up there, just about our next legal clinic coming up in Toronto. So as I mentioned, it's on Saturday, August 12th. It will be taking place downtown Toronto. What I typically ask people to do is you email the email on this brochure, which is refugeessptoronto@gmail.com. And you'll let me know what type of services you're actually looking for, and then we'll start the conversation of what documents do you have and all of those things. So what would be most helpful for you as settlement workers is if you're willing to post this or send this out to your listservs, or mention it to clients that are coming in that you think would be of benefit. So they can email us directly. It doesn't have to be you emailing. We're happy to work directly with the client and the sponsor group to facilitate that. In terms of referring cases to us, in the GTA and Southwestern Ontario, refer all potential cases to us via email at refugeessptoronto@gmail.com. And for the rest of the province, we ask that you refer them to our national office, which is Refugee SSP at UI, and our headquarters is based in Ottawa. As I mentioned, you can connect us directly with the client if that's easier, or you can give the client our email and they can send it out. So it's really whatever works for you best. We're happy to receive that information. Lastly, I would also just like to mention that we do have a judicial review lawyer list. So this is a list of experienced immigration and refugee lawyers who are involved in SSP, and they've agreed to provide free consultations for refugee sponsorship refusals and then offer services of a judicial review at a reduced fee. So this is when someone has submitted a refugee sponsorship application and their case was refused. We have lawyers who will provide a free consultation about that refusal, and then if they do want to, if the client chooses to appeal it, the lawyer will do that at a reduced fee. It is important to know that there are very sensitive timelines associated with refusals of these applications. This is if the application has been refused in Canada, they only have 15 days to submit the first paperwork for the appeal. And if the refusal happens overseas at the visa office, they have 60 days to appeal that. So they are very sensitive timelines, and it's very difficult if you've missed that deadline to request to be allowed to still appeal. So it's important to take note of that. And if you do have clients or people who come into your offices that have had applications refused, you can let them know to email me at refugeessptoronto@gmail.com, and I can figure out what it is that they need, and then I usually provide that person with the referral list of those lawyers so they can access those services as well. Okay, so I was able to quickly get through everything that we needed. I hope that provided you with a good kind of overview of how our organization works, where we came from, and what services we offer. But what I'm hoping to do now, as I've left quite a bit of space for questions, is really hear from you about issues that maybe clients or walk-ins have had at your organizations, and whether you have questions about the types of services we offer, or things that you think would benefit your organization in terms of what we provide.
Thank you very much, Kelsey, for your presentation. That was great. So in terms of questions, as we mentioned at the beginning, people can either click the hand icon to raise their hand, and then we'll unmute you so you can speak, or you can type your questions in the box in the bottom of the control panel. And actually, we did have one question come in while you were speaking, Kelsey, so I'll go ahead and read that one out for you now. It says, do you offer legal clinics for sponsored individuals or families? We are receiving clients who have been privately sponsored and whose sponsors do not want to continue supporting them, especially financially. Would you be able to answer that for us?
Just to clarify, maybe the person who wrote the question can clarify, the sponsors of the refugees who have already arrived in Canada do not want to continue providing them with support?
That is the way I understood the question. Martha, if you're listening, if there's anything else you'd like to add, please do. Otherwise, that's the way I understood it, yes, that they've already arrived, they've been sponsored, but that their sponsors do not want to continue supporting them now that they're here, especially financially.
Right. So unfortunately, the type of legal services we provide is simply for the refugee application and not for any kind of breakdown issues after the fact. But I do know that the Refugee Sponsorship Training Program that I mentioned before, RSTP, has people who specifically work on these types of issues where there's a potential breakdown between the refugee and the sponsor group. So what I would recommend is contacting RSTP. Their website is just rstp.ca. They have a phone number, they have an email, and they're very responsive, but they have people who work on that directly to try to help with mediation and negotiation before it turns into an official breakdown. But most certainly the refugees have the right to pursue that, as the sponsors have signed an agreement with the government to provide them with financial support for the full 12 months that they are here.
Okay, thank you, Kelsey. There's another question relating to the child tax benefit, asking if it's legal for private sponsors to take that from the families. So this is sort of a different kind of question, but is there anything you could say about that?
I am not a tax lawyer, but I can tell you that the sponsor groups should not be taking anything from the refugees. The refugees filing taxes as individual people are entitled to the UCC, the Universal Child Care Benefits. They're entitled to all of the tax benefits that they should be receiving as permanent residents. And if there are issues or debates with that, with the sponsor group taking things from them, again, I would refer them to RSTP, or potentially, if you are their caseworker, you contact RSTP directly. and ask the best way to proceed forward, because the refugees have the right to that money.
If I could, sorry, this is Sarah. If I could add to what Kelsey said for this question, it's true the sponsors are not allowed to take anything, including this payment. So it should be going directly most of the time to the mother because she registers for it. But it's legally, it's possible that the group is entitled to, sponsoring group can deduct that amount from the financial support that they give to the sponsored refugee. So even though they may not directly receive the funds that are given, that are, for example, deposited into the family's account directly, they could, if they wanted to, deduct that amount from the financial support that they give the family. Whether or not it's nice or ethical is a different question, but legally they can do that. It's the prerogative of the sponsorship group, as long as they still support, as long as the overall financial support isn't less than the minimum as set out in the sponsorship cost table.
Right.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there any more questions at this time?
There are 2 more questions.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yes. Okay. I think there are 2 parts to this one. So the situation is that they're having a problem with the UNHCR refugee card that is needed for refugees in Lebanon, Turkey. Oh, sorry. Refugees in Lebanon, Turkey, and Jordan don't have it. What advice can we give to these families, and where do we refer them?
Right. So yeah, unfortunately, many of the highest refugee population countries, Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey, they're unable to get the UNHCR refugee status because of the relationship the UN has with those governments. It's also the case for many of the Gulf countries. So where refugees are in countries that they are unable to get a UN document, their only option is to apply under a sponsorship agreement holder. So when you have people that are having these inquiries, what I do is refer them to the list of sponsorship agreement holders, which is on the IRCC website. If you just type into Google sponsorship agreement holder list, it will come up. They are all listed by province. And you can provide that link to the person inquiring and say, you can contact these sponsorship agreement holders and see if any of them are willing to take your family's case. I do also provide a caveat of that, though, which is that SAWs have very limited allocations in terms of they're given a quota every year of the number of refugees they're actually able to sponsor, many of which have already reached their quota for 2017 as they were given small amounts. So what I would recommend is if the SAW is full for this year, ask if they can try to get on a waiting list for 2018 so that at least they know they have an ability to submit an application next year. Different SAWs have different requirements. Some take a waiting list, some do not. But I do kind of let the client know all of that information, and then they can proceed to contact whichever ones they think make the most sense for their situation.
Thank you, Kelsey. There is another question about who you provide training to. So other than to lawyers and students, do you provide training to other groups, for example, directly to frontline workers?
Right. So in terms of training, we only provide training to our lawyers and our law students because they're volunteering within our program. So we're training them on how to fill out these applications. But we do provide public information sessions along with oftentimes RSTP. And that can be to a variety of different people about how to fill out the application, about what is included in an application, and general information. So for the public, for sponsor groups, for settlement workers, whoever would like that information, but that is kind of general information about how to fill out an application. We're usually doing those types of presentations in conjunction with organizations, like I said, like RSTP. So that's part of our public legal information component.
Thank you.
And if you are interested in doing that, please feel free to send me an email that's on this this laptop, and I can coordinate with our partners at RSTP and see if we're able to provide some type of programming for one of your agencies.
Great, that sounds good. Okay, another question. So it says there are only 5 SAWs in Ottawa and all have a wait list at this point. Is it possible to connect people to the Toronto area, or does it have to be local? Some people come and say that they have the money and they just want to be connected to someone who can get their relatives, bring their relatives to Canada. I'm sorry, I don't quite understand the rest of it, but do you mind addressing the part I just read out?
Sure, yeah. So in terms of when SAWs have reached their allocations, it's really up to individual SAWs how they will do partnerships. So a lot of times SAWs will want the sponsor group or the family member to live in the same area as their congregation or as their organization. So for example, an organization in Ottawa, if the family who the sponsor group is living in Ottawa, or the family members, the SAW will say, you're going to be part of the settlement support. We want the congregation and everyone to be in the same area. In other circumstances, some SAWs will say, if they accept the case, then the congregation, I'm using congregation as an example because I'm thinking of the national SAWs, but they'll want the organization or the sponsor group, they can be anywhere, but then that means also that the refugees are going to be settled where they are. So practically speaking, I think SAWs are very aware that if you are a family member and you want to sponsor, let's say your brother from overseas, you probably want your brother to live in the same area as you. You don't want them to live across the country. And you're going to be invested in their settlement support, and so the SAW will know that it's of benefit to the refugee and the settlement support that it be in your own community. So I think that's the general perception. But if the client is saying that they just want their family member to get here, and the SAW can take over the sponsorship and the settlement, and someone else can sponsor them and they can be somewhere else in the country, then that's a conversation you need to have with that individual SAW. So I wouldn't say that it's impossible. I wouldn't say don't contact the Toronto SAWs. I would say there's no harm in doing that and having that conversation, but being aware that the SAW might say, we do want you to be living in the same area that the refugee is going to be arriving in.
Okay, thank you, Kelsey. Does anyone else have a question at this point? Okay, I don't see any more questions, but just a reminder, if anyone would prefer to speak, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you. Okay, well, I don't see any more coming in. Oh, sorry. No, there is one. I think I'll need to ask for clarification. It says, if one of the group of 5 has high income, would that work? It's from Sultana. Sultana, could you clarify your question a bit, please? Sultana, did you want to add anything else to help us understand your question a little better? Okay, so we have 5 people to sponsor, but we're just waiting for the rest of that thought to come in, I guess. But only one of them has income. Okay, so yes, would that be a problem if you have 5 people to sponsor, but only one of the people has income?
So it depends on how you're going to be doing the sponsorship. If the group has all of their money in a bank account, it doesn't matter about anyone's income. So if they have the entire amount in a bank account, then it doesn't matter about anyone's income. If, though, they don't have all the money in a bank account and they need to have some of it against their income, then at least 3 people in the group need to be committing financially to their income. So 2 people could not, but at least 3 people need to if they are pledging against their income because they don't have everything already saved in a bank account.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful for people to know. Are there any more questions? Okay, well, if there are no more questions, then Sarah, maybe it's time to conclude.
Yes. Thank you so much for the questions. They're really good. And thank you, of course, Kelsey, also for your information. That was very informative and interesting. And I just want to thank everyone for making the time to attend today's webinar. We know you have lots of clients, and it's always perhaps a challenge to find the time to join these webinars. If you have any other questions that come up after this webinar, you can contact Lorraine or I at Refugee.Settlement.Org. And as you can see, Kelsey also has her email on the screen, refugees@toronto@gmail.com. You will receive a follow-up email, but when you leave today's webinar, you also will get a pop-up window with a survey. We would really appreciate it if you could take the time to respond to the survey questions. They're just 5 or 6 questions. Some of the multiple choice and the rating for this webinar. It would be really helpful for us to get your feedback so we know what other topics to identify for our webinar-based trainings and what went well, what could be improved, and so on. So we really appreciate it if you could take some time to complete that. Within 24 to 48 hours, you will also receive a follow-up email. That follow-up email has a link. We'll have a link to where the page where this recording will be posted, as well as where Kelsey's slides will be posted. And it's also the page where you can see a calendar of upcoming webinars. Our next webinar is not until Monday, actually. We'll be repeating a webinar that where we had some technical difficulties. The webinar on Monday is on the topic of how to stay up to date with refugee and immigration policy and program changes. It's not the actual updates, but it's about resources that help you stay up to date. If you would like to participate in that, you can see that also on our wiki project, on our project's wiki page. Again, the link to that will be in the follow-up email. So on behalf of Okasi and Kelsey, thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you have a great day. Thank you. Bye.